Today's video, we're going to talk about offline conversion tracking using the GCLID method versus enhanced conversion tracking method. Using Google's unique serial number that they tie to every click to track an offline sale, an offline lead that was marked as qualified, whatever you're doing to try to track that inside your Google Ads account. There's two ways to do it: through that unique serial code, which Google calls the Google Click ID, as well as the secondary way that they say they recommend, which is through the enhanced conversion tracking system that they have, where you take the customer's email and you pass it back to Google. Okay? Now, there's been some recent confusion about this as to which one you should use, because I mentioned all day that you should be using the GCLID method on this channel, whereas Google is saying the enhanced conversion tracking is the preferred method. I got a newsflash for you here. Every time Google recommends something to you, because it's going to be good for Google. Sometimes it's nice if Google can recommend something that makes you money and them money, but if it comes down to it at the end of the day, it's to make them money, period. So with that said, Google wants customer data that you have and give it to them because they can monetize that data. They can not try to maybe even sell directly to your customers, which they certainly do that, because once they have your customer list, they can then sell that list directly or indirectly, whatever you want to say, to somebody else selling to a similar customer, a similar thing, but also indirectly, they can use it for their machine learning algorithms. So their information, they're biased to start with, but their information certainly is biased in this case. I'm telling you it is, because there's drawbacks to the enhanced conversion tracking method to track an offline sale that occurred through the telephone that you got that didn't go through your shopping cart, or leads that you're trying to mark as qualified to have the ad algorithm steer in the direction of more qualified leads versus just a lead, a phone call, a form fill. There's a particular way to do it to get the most results. And that is through the GCLID system and through their API in addition, technically, which I'm going to talk more about that in this video. So if you stay to the end of the video, I will give you some information on how much more money you can make if you're not doing offline conversion tracking at all, compared to adding it and then being able to have the full amount of data to optimize your campaigns with. Also, when you're only doing enhanced conversion tracking versus the GCLID method, how much you can make. I'll have a couple different case studies for you where we'll go over that information. But before I get into the content, if you do not know who I am Corey Zyman, owner of Guaranteed PPC, an online advertising agency that specializes in guaranteeing results for clients. That is, we do not charge our clients management fees upfront until we can get them a certain minimum lift in their profitability, basically in excess of what we charge as far as management fees. We are the only agency out there doing anything like that, which should tell you something about the quality of the information on this particular video. So with that said, getting into the content here, basically I've got this separated out into the pros and cons and associated lists of GCLID, offline-based conversion tracking, and enhanced conversion tracking, which, just to be clear here again, offline conversion tracking is tracking stuff that happens offline, just like it sounds. If a person is going to be able to be converted, you can track what they are doing on your website itself or from Google, like if you want to add to that calls from Google that are on your ad, or if you're doing a lead ad, whether somebody fills out the form on your lead ad, you're going to be able to do that with your standard conversion tracking. Anything that occurs not on your website or on a Google property or on your ad directly, you've got to track it with offline conversion tracking, such as a phone call that came in that you processed an order through the customer through your virtual credit card terminal. You are actually scoring leads, good, bad, and then using the good lead that you found out was good after they turned into a lead, passing that back into your ad account. Of course, that doesn't happen on your website directly, so you would use offline conversion tracking. Whereas if you had a lead tracking system where you had like a funnel on your website where people had to answer questions, and through the answers they give you, they would actually, that would tell you if a lead was qualified or not. You could actually do that without offline conversion tracking and not having to do either one of these, just to clear things up. So with that said, if you are the person that wants to track offline conversions, which most businesses should, by the way, if you're in services, you want to track either leads that are qualified, or sales normally go through within 90 days, or you get an idea of the contract value, the estimated contract value on the sale you're going to get. you're going to pass that information back into Google Ads so you can use that to steer the ads. Because with smart bidding, you're going to get a ton more results when you have that extra data running your campaigns, given that going for a cheap phone call versus a profitable phone call is two completely separate different things. Take it from me. If you're doing e-commerce though, even less people do offline conversion tracking, which you want to do it there because a lot of orders come through the phone. Unless you do not take an online order through the phone at all, then that may not apply. But most of you guys will do, whether it's if somebody wants to buy an order of 100 because they're a retailer, you want to be able to take that data and pass it back to your account so that the system can find you more huge whale customers like that. And if they don't, their algorithm doesn't see it, they can't optimize for it. You can't complain about not getting results if you don't give it all the data that it's allowing you to give it, but you won't or refuse to give it to them. So knowing that, if you're going to get into offline conversion tracking, because it's going to get you a lot more results, and I mean a lot more, and I'll talk more about that in the later part of this video, like I mentioned I would. You got the GCLID way to do it, and then the enhanced conversion tracking way to do it, which is, this is done through a Google Click ID, which is what GCLID stands for. The Google Click ID is normally at the end of the URL. So if you click on any Google ad, and then the page it's taking you to, it'll be at the end of the URL itself there. It'll say GCLID equals blah, 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 random string of characters and numbers, and that's your Google Click ID. And then what you need to do to track by Google Click ID is to get that code from the URL when the person submits a form or calls, capture it, store it until the person buys or is qualified or whatever you're going to ultimately do in terms of tracking, and then pass it back to Google, and you have a separate conversion goal set up to track that additional offline action, or you can use it to supplement in a conversion goal where you're tracking a phone call and then you tie in revenue to phone call tracking goal, which is another way you could go about doing this, so to say. So that is Google Click ID. And then there's enhanced conversion tracking, which is something totally separate that, like I mentioned, Google will recommend to do offline conversion tracking, where you're collecting the email address via their enhanced conversion tracking setup. Basically, when somebody later on is going to be marked a qualified lead, they buy or whatever, you can then, through the enhanced conversion tracking setup, pass that information back to Google Ads and then see that offline conversion inside your account. There's definitely a drawback to that, of which I'll talk about here. But before I do, on the Google Click ID side, sometimes Google Click IDs are not available. This has been a somewhat recent thing, which is why people have been tempted to go ahead and have been steered artificially to do enhanced conversion tracking setups to track offline conversions. The Google Click ID is not there on if users are on an Apple device, on some Apple devices, I should say. And with those Apple devices, the Google Click ID you're not able to get it, essentially. And what will be in its place, though, is going into the next thing on my list here, G-Braid or W-Braid is what it's actually called. So what you'll notice on certain devices, if you click on an ad, instead of at the end of the URL, it says Google Click ID, it says W-Braid equals or G-Braid equals. Therefore, it's in placement of the Google Click ID. So with that, you aren't able to always get the Click ID. You can't. Some niches, it's going to be a lot more depending on what is the primary device that people are on that they're searching from in your space. And if you're not sure, because it varies niche to niche, you can go ahead and you can pull the data from the URL every time and then see what percentage of the time the Google Click ID is there, and then make your judgment call as to whether or not you want to rely on that Google Click ID by itself. If you don't want to rely on the Google Click ID by itself, you can actually use the Google Ads API, because when I do offline conversion tracking for clients that are firm, what we typically do is we do manual uploads. The reason for this being is because it's the most accurate. If a human is actually going ahead and verifying, because we'll get, like, let's say we're tracking sales that occur from our leads, and we'll set up a separate tracking goal inside of our Google Ads account to track those sales. Once a month, we'll ask from the client all the people who bought in your company. Don't worry about if it's from Google Ads, whatever, we'll sift through it. The name of the customer, how much they spent, secondarily to that, as it help out a little bit, the date that they came in, and so forth, okay? Then, with that information, we're going to, with our CallRail account, which CallRail will capture every phone call and every form lead that comes through the website and the associated click IDs and so forth, metadata about the user's click. And with that, you can use CallRail's integration with Google Ads so that when somebody buys under that call record or under that form record in our CallRail account, we can actually mark in the value box the amount of the sale there. Once we match it up, when we find when there's the customer Joe Smith on our customer list that we got from our client, we find Joe Smith's call that originated that person's contact with the company. We can listen to the call recording on every call that came in from Google Ads. We find during listening to the call recording, John Smith mentioning his name there. And so then we know to take the value from John Smith on our customer's sales sheet, plug it in to the value box under that call record in CallRail, and then right away that information will shoot over to Google Ads under our conversion goal we set up to track sales that occur from our leads, so to say. If you use the API, you don't need a Google Click ID anymore. You can actually use Google Click ID, WBraid, or GBraid. So you can use any of the three. For some reason though, I don't know why Google's doing it, but you can only upload Google Click ID if you're going to use a manual spreadsheet. Because normally what we do is because there's two ways to send this offline conversion data to Google Ads via this Google Click ID side or method, if you will. And you can do it through a spreadsheet. You just take all the Google Click IDs, put it into a spreadsheet, you upload it to their upload system and under the conversion section of Google Ads, and then your data shows up in your pre-designated conversion goals that you want it to show up under, that you specify on the sheet as well. Or use the API to send that data to Google Ads about your offline conversions that are occurring. And you could create a custom script if you wanted to that would log all your calls and all the associated click IDs. And then you on some sort of back-end thing like a Google Sheet, you could say, this one sold, this is how much they spent. You could have it as soon as that is filled in, it fires data through the API back to Google Ads, and then your conversion's in there. Of which, by the way, is generally a good idea to directly connect once a human verifies that the sale occurred and it was tied to this specific unique caller that called in a few weeks ago. Because the quicker you get your offline conversion data into your Google Ads account, the quicker that the campaigns are going to be able to utilize it and take advantage of it for future placements and refinement of your ads. So whether you do it through a custom system that you set up, as I mentioned, or you do it through CallRail where there's no custom scripting needed, you just need to install CallRail on your website and then you can fill in the value box next to each call or every form lead. So, and then use CallRail's integration to Google Ads to send data through their Google Ads' API because it sends it through the API. You can go ahead and upload it that way, but that will take care of the few conversions where you do not have the Google Click ID and can still upload your conversions. With that said, by the way, just as a quick side, CallRail actually we just use CallRail on our side because it's so much easier. Once you install the CallRail tracking code on your website, every phone call and then every form fill gets picked up in CallRail, so we already know what the Google Click ID is. And then of course with that, if you wanted to actually upload the GBraid or WBraid, you could still do it through their API. The way that it gets every form lead into CallRail, it's awesome because you don't have to modify your contact forms on your site at all. Once the CallRail code is on your site and you activate the form tracking module on CallRail, it'll automatically, just with that one button click, it'll immediately pick up all the form leads across your entire website, landing pages, all of it. And every single form, it's a really slick tool, which is, CallRail's been coming out with some really good features recently, and that was the best one that I've seen they came out with technically. So with that said, you're able to grab all these Google Click IDs without having to modify your forms, because it used to be to get the Google Click ID, you had to modify every contact form and add a hidden field that would collect the Google Click ID itself and get your Google Click IDs that way, whereas with the form tracking system, you don't need to anymore. So with that said, though, the main reason why you would want to go with Google Click ID to upload your offline conversions versus enhanced conversion tracking is, drum roll please, it's because you can actually track the offline conversions for phone calls as well, which in most businesses, phone calls are where most of the sales come from. Not all. Some spaces, like in the speaking space, 90% of the leads come from form fills. So in that case, enhanced conversion tracking could be just fine. It's an automated process ultimately, and then there's no need to manually upload anything or use Google Ads' API per se. And there's no technical drawback to using enhanced conversion tracking to track your offline conversions. All right. But like I said before, the more data that you have inside your Google Ads account and the more accurate the data is, and furthermore, the quicker it gets in there, the more results you're going to get out of your ad spend. Period. Bottom line. The ad system nowadays is run off an algorithm. It figures out what portion of the keyword traffic that you're trying to target and go after is profitable and not profitable based upon prior performance of your ads. And it's trying to give you the benefit of the doubt if your ads do better than the competition for certain users, because then they want to show your ad more. The data, particularly offline conversion tracking data, allows you to be able to, it's like seeing in the dark with night vision goggles, where certain leads or certain opportunities are worth way more than the average opportunity, and to double, triple down in those on those opportunities as a result. You could kind of do that if you track some of your conversions, cart purchases but not purchases through the phone, or track whether a lead was qualified but not the resulting revenue and profit from the job. You'll get even better results because algorithms can be that much more accurate at getting you the result you're looking for at the end of the day, which is an increase in profit because it has more accurate data to go on. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and use Google Click ID so I can get all sales imported into the system. Every single account should be tracking sales so you can optimize on a profit level, not a cost per lead level, or anything besides that. Some businesses, you won't get a sale within 90 days, which is the maximum time window you have to upload an offline conversion tracking goal to Google Ads. But in that case, though, you're going to go to the next second best thing, which is to track whether a lead was qualified or not, and even score the lead. In those cases, I like to score a lead between 1 and 10, and have that be the conversion value that I'm passing back to Google Ads as far as our conversion. So the goal is set up to track qualified leads, and then the value, because there's always two parts to a conversion goal, whether it happened and then the value. The value is now, instead of the sales revenue, it's going to be the lead score, so that the algorithm is going to optimize for the highest lead scores it can find. And when we divide lead score by ad spend, it's going to get us the highest ratio or number, which basically replaces profit or ROI with something that's in a close proximity to it, if that makes sense. We've done that on, for instance, the call center space, call center services. So many of those contracts are worth lots of money, but they don't close right away. And the value of the contract varies a lot based upon the type of company we're dealing with. So scoring the leads made a huge difference in that instance, getting that information in there, not just to track qualified leads, but the presumed value of a lead based upon and us giving it a score. Sometimes, by the way, you can actually track the presumed contract value. So with that said, we've had also in the restoration services space, some of the jobs are going to go on to, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in renovation. In the asbestos space, the more expensive of whatever it is that's being sold, the longer the sales cycle window or length of time is going to be. That is the time from the initial click to the sale. So in those situations where you're selling 7-figure deals, 6-figure deals, whatever, you got to be able to then not to upload revenue, but something that's as close as possible to that. The presumed contract value, this contract will be worth $80,000 if it closes. It's not as great as knowing that it closed and using that to steer your ads, but it's pretty good. So at least over time, the algorithm's optimizing for would-be bigger deals versus just any deal, given that some deals are worth 10 times as much as other deals, and you want the algorithm to optimize for bigger deals. Otherwise, the algorithm is going to optimize for the cheapest phone calls, and the cheapest phone calls in general are never going to line up with being the biggest deals as a result. So, and that's just kind of how it rolls, particularly because it's still an auction system. Ultimately, bidding is going to be more competitive on a certain keyword that lines up with a better quality lead. And if you're stuck on only paying $30 a call, you'll get outbid for keywords where it looks like there should be better quality traffic there, but you're just simply being outbid because you're just putting a blanket rule, must be $30 cost per conversion or less, because you're only looking at the aggregate as to what the value of a lead is from all leads that you're getting, when reality is those leads from this keyword are going to be 10 times as profitable as leads from this keyword. And if you can't see it, you can't get near the results that you're looking for. Take it from me. We now do, because it matters so much on our accounts, offline conversion tracking on every single account that we're running with. So with that said, on the flip side here on enhanced conversion tracking, if you're going to use that to track offline conversions, yes, you can do it. There's no need for a Google Click ID once it's set up. But customers who call can't be tracked. And if Google would simply give us a way to do an enhanced conversion tracking setup where it tracks calls somehow, then maybe this would change. But even then, I believe even if they tried to do that, which is why they aren't doing it yet, it would be very cumbersome in order to set it up. CallRail really simplifies the process of tracking offline conversions because there's a dashboard with a good user interface that has all your leads there and the recordings and a place where you can add the value in there and the place where you can thumb up or thumb down that lead, so that if you thumb up it, the lead gets sent to Google. If it doesn't, it's not sent. So you can track which leads are qualified and then optimize for what leads are qualified. So anyway, that is though the main differences between the two, the pros and cons, if you will. If you're not still sure what to do, reach out to me at my firm at guaranteedppc.com and I'll let you know what we can do for you in terms of results, adding this a part of your strategy, and like 10 other things that'll get you results. And then we can have a conversation about it. We also, by the way, have been selling ad templates recently. We've worked in 200 niches now in the last 10 to 11 years of running this firm. If we worked in your niche market already, you'd be silly not to buy our ads, landing pages, campaign templates that work for your niche market that we've spent years perfecting in your niche market. You could just copy paste it into your own ad account and get those results for yourself. With that, and if you're just trying to start another business, you could just start another business starting from the template. And that template, because it works to sell that product or service, because that template sells that product or service predictably already, you're going to start with a winning business model right from the start. So with that said, we've got people that use these templates they buy templates they generate leads because they generate the leads at such a low cost. They're able to mark the leads up and sell them to other businesses. We got people doing drop shipping with a lot of different things you can do there. And we could tell you the results you're going to get with the template up front before you use it, of course. So if you're interested in any of those other opportunities, you can also reach out to me at guaranteedppc.com. If you have any individual questions about what you're doing or anything I'm talking about here today, you can always leave me a comment in the comment section below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a question or comment on this channel, usually within 24 hours time as well. So with that said, getting back to the summary of what I was talking about here, Google Click ID it's more labor intensive to get the most accurate data, a real human verifying which leads actually turn into a sale. When I say it's more accurate, because here's the dilemma with offline conversion tracking. The main thing is, particularly in B2B, but not just B2B, you got the person who calls in is not the person who buys. Okay, so with enhanced conversion tracking, the email address, it gets screwed up because maybe the wife initially was doing the research on the mailbox that they wanted to buy. And then later on, the husband calls in to buy. Well, if you don't have a human verifying this and putting the data together and realizing, hey, this guy who bought that was tied to this lady, you're not going to be able to understand to upload that offline conversion to Google Ads, and you're going to miss part of your data. And going back, as I mentioned before, the weaker the data, the more inconsistent the data, the less your results. With that said, you want a human, if possible, to look through the data, and you want to be able to tie the data together like that as best as you can. And as it comes to B2B, it's even worse. The person who's the gopher that's meant to do the research or initially starts doing the research for the company is usually not the person buying and putting through the payment or putting the order through at the last second, or if it's the owner or the accounts payable, whatever. So this stuff's really important to get right. And even a 10% inefficiency on the data can affect your results 30, 40% because the algorithm just really starts to make big mistakes. It's not that if you lose 10% of the data, you lose 10% of the results. It's you lose 30% of the results. Particularly as well, by the way, is if you're tracking through a cart and you're tracking phone sales, the big orders skewed coming through the phone. So let's say 2/3 of the orders will come through the big orders, the really big orders will come through the phone. And if you're not tracking those, then you're going to screw up. And the bigger companies that have multiple people involved, those people are also skewing bigger. With that said, okay, that is, though, anyway, it's put everything together, really why it's important to do offline conversion tracking, to do it right, how to do it right. If you want to know how much this is actually going to end up result in terms of profit now, going into the case study part of this video, we've had a mailbox company specifically going, because we do this all the time now. I got so many examples of this. Mailbox company alone that I'm talking about that we worked with, they sold designer or decorative mailboxes. It was a fairly high-end product, okay? A lot of their orders did come through the phone. We tracked card sales, but we also tracked the phone sales at least once we started to work with this particular client. We didn't track phone sales right away. At that particular time, a lot of times what we would do is when we onboarded a client, we would bring in the offline conversion tracking a little bit later on because there was more important stuff to do. Now that I know how important it is, we're going to try to do it right away with every client we're onboarding for all the reasons I said on this video. At the beginning of us working on optimizing the existing campaigns that they had that were running for a while, we were able to, just through the normal techniques of adding negative keywords and on and on and on, get a consistent 10 to 15% in sales growth at the ROI that the client was at already on those campaigns already just by doing all that stuff. However, once we started to add the offline conversion tracking the phone sales data, the phone sales that were coming in, which is about 35% of the sales that they were getting was coming through the phone specifically, the increase in results went up massively, which is what you should expect once you start doing it. Now, once we started doing it, and here's why people don't do it, because there's no immediate payoff. Once you start uploading the data, it'll help you a little bit right away, but the real results come in like 6 months down the road. So right away, we really didn't notice too much adding the phone sales to the account. However, the amount of growth, our rate of growth was started to pick up, and it started to hockey stick, basically, the further we got into the process and having after started to add it, so to say. We were up to, instead of getting 10-15% in sales growth a month, by the end of the next 6 months of doing that, because we started working with the client, we added the offline conversion tracking sales about 6 months in. So we were getting the 10-15% sales growth a month at that time, given their campaigns were very inefficient at the beginning. Once we started adding that in, we went to 30-40% a month. Just absolutely exploded the sales once we found out the phone sales that they were getting, and adding that last piece to what we were doing just skyrocketed their sales, which naturally didn't keep going like that forever, but for the next 6 to 12 months after that, that's specifically what we were able to do once the data was added in there, and of course adding all the techniques that we were using on top of it. Basically, because there's pockets of traffic that Google didn't see that were worth going after, but once the sales were uploaded successfully, they understood the value of those pockets and they just started adding them in. That really made the difference, okay? We had a second case study where we had a crime scene cleanup company. We've worked with several of these companies now. I talk about all the time for local services, you need to do sales tracking in your account so that when a sale occurs, Google knows about it and so you can optimize for more sales. Specifically, we would just optimize for leads at the beginning, okay? We started to just optimize for qualified leads. Not even sales, but just whether the lead was qualified or not. And we would also score the lead between 1 and 10 itself. So the value would be between 1 and 10 based upon what the person thought at the company that we were working for thought the lead was in terms of quality itself. And we went from about 50% of the leads actually being qualified leads to around 90% once we started actually passing that data back to Google and utilizing it fully itself, which increased the total profit we were making quite a bit because it cut expenses, but it also found the pockets of traffic that were the leads that were the better leads and bid more for them. So we're basically getting shown 100% of the time for those situations, because the other users weren't able to bid so much for those users. We knew the value of them, and so we were able to outbid everybody, essentially, or most people. So our ad would always show in those situations. So we went from being plateaued to giving our entire account a whole nother leg of growth, a whole nother life to the account, which is what it's going to basically do for you if you set this up and you build up and amass a certain few months of data, really get it piled up in the system with the extra data flowing in, and make an additional 2 to 3 times as much money, which is what we'd had in this particular case with crime scene cleanup company that we were working with, which I've talked about this case study in particular in other videos about offline conversion tracking. So to the answer of to the question of how much more money can I make doing offline conversion tracking, you should be able to make at least double, if not 3 to 5 times as much money from your Google Ads account when you add the offline conversion data. Obviously, you'll make more, or I'll be on the higher side of that, if the percentage of data that you're adding is higher. So if you're only missing 10% of the data right now, maybe you only get a 30% lift in your overall account profitability. If you're missing 20%, it can be closer to half of your sales and profit are going to be not there because you didn't have the offline conversion tracking. And it just keeps going. And if you're only optimizing for leads and not whether the lead's qualified and scoring the lead, at least double, if not triple, to even more actual results out of your account by adding that extra data to your account. So with that said, if you want to know a lot more techniques like this that really make the difference in your account and you need to know about that and that other people frankly aren't talking about, you should subscribe to this channel, because I have all these techniques basically I found that are up my sleeve here that I'm sharing with you on this channel. So if you haven't subscribed, you should. And it's valuable information because most of the information that you find on YouTube and elsewhere online is given to you by people who don't really run any ads, and they're just having staff do all the work, but they're not the ones doing strategy themselves or in the weeds doing the work, or they don't even run any campaigns at all. And so the information is just basically useless or very close to useless. I spend 40 hours a week doing ad strategy at our firm for dozens of ad accounts. So I know what's basically working. I've been doing it over a decade now. So if you're going to learn from anybody, you learn from myself first at the very least. I also have a great blog on my site that you can follow at guaranteedppc.com/blog. The blog has step-by-step instructions in order to replicate the strategies we're using to guarantee results for our clients. And I highly recommend you check that out as well. If you like the channel, you're going to like my blog probably even more, as most people do. They just don't know about it. So you should check that out as well. With all that said, that pretty much spells out the pros and cons to it. I mean, not to say there's ever a complete right way to do things. Depending on your niche, you don't get phone calls. Enhanced conversion tracking might be good enough for you. That said, if you have calls, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do GCLID tracking, because that might unlock the other half of your profit or more that you're not getting right now because you're just simply not doing it. So if you're unsure where your bottlenecked, ultimately I can do a 30-minute coaching call with you and find out whether it's your ad, your pricing strategy, your website. I started doing these coaching calls with people about 6 to 7 months ago now. Every single person who's gotten one came back for another call. And I've been doing them because a lot of you guys need help figuring out where the bottleneck is. And the ads aren't the problem. It's the pricing strategy or whatever. And I'm very good at spotting the bottleneck companies because I've been doing it with clients for so long now, hundreds of different companies, to find out what we need to do to get the ads working. Because a lot of times it's not the ad that's the issue. It's the tracking or something else. And I do it to save myself time and money on, I don't want to work on stuff that won't work ultimately. So if you're interested in that, you can also reach out to me at guaranteedppc.com. I'll wrap everything up with that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Remember when I said offline conversion tracking was important during this video? Well, this video here tells you how to do it.